bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Wood Elves against the Dwarves on the map of Galbaraz. So as you can immediately see, we are doing a bit of a scumbaggy skirmish build, and obviously this is a bit iffy against Dwarves. Dwarves do have a lot of artillery and shooting, so I am going to be actually experimenting with a bit of a new strategy, or a new sort of perhaps gimmick, I suppose I should call it. Either way, for my lord I did bring the Glady. She is on her Forest Dragon. This does give her very solid physical and missile resist, which means that if my opponent, for example, brings cannons or bolt throwers, as he did here, he's going to struggle to put quite as much of a dent into my HP pool here as he normally would. She, of course, does have Soporific Breath, Arrows of Kurnus, as well as Prey of Anathrema, which will synchronize really nicely with this mob of Way Watchers. And we have a lot of Way Watchers, 6 of them spaced out, 3 groups of 2 really. These guys do monstrous range damage, most of it AP. If we look at the exact numbers, they are hitting for 23 armor piercing on a 9-second cooldown, so very potent. And they can really kind of melt the Dowie pretty quickly if they can get past shields and not get sniped in turn. And I'm experimenting with something a little different here. I actually brought a Spellslinger of Beasts here. You can see her on a horse, and she is coming in with one spell only, the Amber Spear. She does have the Wild Heart for improved power reserves. Unfortunately, I did bring Blessings of the Ancients. Just a bit of, I kind of forgot that it's basically useless, but and especially in this situation. And she does have Power Stone. And actually, Amber Spear is a very potent sort of magic missile. It can punch through lines if you can get a good positioning, and it's actually part of the reason why I'm running a horse here instead of an eagle. Had I made some cuts to my expenditures, I could have put her on an eagle, but I really didn't want to, because while it's easier to get a shot with the Amber Spear if you're up on an eagle, you will get much more damage out of it if you're firing from ground level because of the trajectory of the spell. It's very flat, and so being on a horse will be very advantageous. Finally, hidden back here, we do have 2 units of Wildwood Rangers, veteran up to rank 4, mostly just because I had spare chevrons and I didn't feel like putting them on the Way Watchers. These guys are there to do mop-up duty and perhaps defend my troops if needed, but realistically they're just there to do mop-up on wherever I pick off. For my opponent, he did go with a rather interesting build, I think. For his lord, he did bring Rombrindle, and he actually didn't bring any heroes, which is definitely surprising. You often see those with the dwarves, but interestingly enough, did bring Rombrindle, who's not a pushover, but he doesn't have a shield, and he does have the Rune Helm of Zufbar, which is pretty powerful AoE leadership buff. He does have Grumbrindle has no fear, Flash Bomb, Foe Seeker, and of course a Rune Axe of Grumbrindle, which is surprising. That's another thing you don't see all too often, but nonetheless, Grumbrindle is no pushover in melee and can lay the smack down on you. What really surprised me here is that my opponent brought 3 units of long range weapons, and I think these are rather unnecessary against elves. I did not suddenly shift factions on my opponent, so I'm not entirely sure why he thought that great weapons are a good idea, but nonetheless, these guys can definitely be tanky, and probably in a straight-up fight they would definitely lay some smack down on the Wildwood Rangers, though not a great trade for him at all. Perhaps my opponent was worried about Treekin, because he did have the rest of his army here kitted out to deal with more squishy units. He does have a front line of miners with blasting charges, also unshielded. But these guys can definitely, if I try to get close with infantry, these guys will blast him to oblivion. Behind that, he does have 2 units of range with great weapons, as well as 2 units of quarrelers, backed by a single unit of the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers, who are very potent. They are one of the nastiest things you can face as Wood Elves, because they just have monstrous melee stats. Obviously, they don't care about your Wood Elf armor is so bad that the fact that these guys don't have good armor piercing doesn't matter, and those blasting charges can lay a world of hurt on you. And in the back, my opponent does have Dragonback Slayers, 2 Grudge Throwers, and a Bolt Thrower, so a very solid artillery contingent, which you can see is probably was on free fire, and is teeing off here on my Spellslinger, which is pretty relevant. They basically have no chance of hitting. Nonetheless, you can see me poking around with my Glady, trying to scout my opponent out, trying to sense out what he's doing. You can see I do take a few bolt shots there, but it only did about 60 damage actually, which really does show how much damage mitigation you get out of the missile resistance, physical resist, and of course the armor does mitigate whatever little AP those bolt throwers do. Now, one of the problems, of course, as I mentioned before, is that trying to get a firing angle with the Amber Spear is actually rather difficult if you're on a horse. You definitely want to be on flat ground or going downhill towards an opponent. And here you can see there's little undulations. Well, this is an outright hill, and I'm struggling to get a shot, and you can see the quarrelers are actually poking away at me. So definitely a little rough. Fortunately, I do have a pretty small profile, so they're not really hitting very consistently, but nonetheless, definitely a bit of a nuisance, and I finally do spot these rangers with great weapons. And I'm trying to get a cast of Amber Spear here on the Gremlins Ironbreakers, but for some reason it doesn't go off. I do get my Winds of Magic back, but yeah, it doesn't go off, so I don't get a spell. And I'm forced to I just decide to retreat. My cooldown gets reset. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, and this is a bit of a bug, I think. because it wasn't even a misfire where we go into the ground or something. It just didn't go off, and the counter reset. So either way, I'm pulling away, and figured I'll use the exploit that opportunity to start teeing off on these miners with Waywatcher fire. And you can see they're whittling these guys down. You might think it's dumb to fire at the miners, but they are unshielded and they can do quite a bit of damage. I'm actually confident about my Walter Rangers being able to trash the Longbeards. What I really need to get rid of is the miners, any shooting that my opponent might have, and the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. Those are really the priority targets here. In the meantime, you can see the other Way Watchers not really moving. I don't really want to get smushed. I did lose a few models there to the artillery pieces, but at the same time, we did do a little bit of hurt to the miners and took them down a few models and a good chunk of their HP as well. About 1,000 HP off them. In the meantime, I'm trying to flank around with the Spellslinger Beast. My opponent, of course, isn't really able to track me. He could pivot with his War Dance, with his Quarrelers, but he's not really concerned, obviously, about what I can do here. Even if I do get behind him, the Amber Spear can't really pierce. I'm not entirely sure my opponent was aware of what the Amber Spear can do. So it's not a spell you see very often in quick match, and for good reason. I think it's a rather difficult spell to make use of. You can see me trying to get another cast here on the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. This is not an ideal setup, but I figured, you know what, better than nothing, and it does look like we have a line of sight here. And it gets cancelled again, and the cooldown gets reset, so definitely a bit rough. You can see the Quarrelers here firing away. The Quarrelers, though, are expending their ammo. They have already fired off 3 rounds. You can see the bolt thrower here. My Way Watchers got spotted. I'm not entirely sure how, but they're immediately taking the bolt thrower fire. Over here, the Way Watchers also taking artillery fire. Like I mentioned, not entirely sure how they're getting spotted, but definitely some rough stuff. But I'm pushing my Way Watchers forward, trying to get some poke damage on the Longbeards and on the miners and on this kind of squishy front line. But still not able to get shots off. You can see I do start pulling my lady back forward. And you can see that Way Watcher fire coming in hot and heavy on the miners, on the Longbeards. And I don't think this is a good idea for my opponent. As annoying as it is to be shot at, the fact that he's pushing out here is actually going to make it harder for his artillery to stay in firing position. Either way, you can see the miners here getting absolutely annihilated by Way Watcher fire. And I am about to get an Amber Spear here. You can see the windup. And we are going to see an Amber Spear fired on the Norgrimling's Ironbreaker. So you can see here, it just looks absolutely amazing. It's flying straight forward. It is an overcast, and overcast does improve the AP damage as well as the explosive damage. And look at these Norgrimling's Ironbreakers sitting at 90 models, and it just plows through them. And you can see model after model dropping as it just pierces through them and annihilates the unit. You can just see dwarf blood and guts flying all over, spattering the ground. You can see all these little gobbets of Norgrimling Ironbreaker left. And these Ironbreakers went from 90 models and full HP to 40 models in a single shot and under half HP. Absolutely devastating. And this was a single cast. This really shows, like, if you can get a good setup with a Amber Spear, it's brutal what it can do. And it just took off over half the unit of Norgrimling's Ironbreakers in a single cast. Only 11 Winds of Magic. If you think Winds of Fate of Buna or something like that is brutal, watch Amber Spear go off. That isn't it for now. You can see the miners getting crushed here by the Way Watcher fire. You can see the Longbeards here getting crushed by Way Watcher fire. Obviously the Quarrelers here being a bit of a nuisance. So I'm going to actually try to deal with the Quarrelers here. I'm not too worried about the Artie. I don't really feel like dealing with the Slayers right now. I figure I'll deal with them later. So I do pray of Anathema the Quarrelers. I actually move my dragon here. And you can see I'm trying to get a good position here with, and this is really how you want to use magic missiles, how you want to use breath attacks if you can net an opponent and get down the length of the line. With any breath attack, this is ideal. And you can see these Quarrelers are going to lose once again over half their models, instantly tanking down to 28 models there. Just a few of them do kind of stagger up to attention, but they are absolutely smushed, and they are fleeing. They are in such bad shape. I do take a bolt thrower shot to the face there. You can see some of my opponent's troops that are routing. You can see I do fire off an arrow of Kurnus here, getting quite a few kills on the Longbeard, so nothing too fancy. And really, we're just trying to whittle down my opponent's troops with the Way Watchers. We're just doing an absolute champion job at crushing these people. Meantime, the Glady just poking away at the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. I'm ignoring the bolt throw. The bolt throw is quite frankly not able to do enough damage. It does, the bolt thrower, if we look at the stats here, the bolt thrower does 116 bonus first large, so about 170-ish damage. I don't really, not about to do all the math, but 170-ish damage, and it's getting cut in under half by the Glady with her armor and her resistances, so really pretty good. You can see Norgrimling's Ironbreakers are getting chipped away. The Longbeards actually break the Withering Fire. You can see these Longbeards are now starting to suffer. My opponent does have artillery firing away, but the Way Watchers still have a healthy amount of ammo. And one of the cool things is that if your units start getting exhausted, your melee attack and your chance to hit and all that starts going down. But for ranged units, actually, the only debuff is Rate of Fire, which is relatively insignificant compared to the debuffs to AP damage on melee and debuffs to melee attack and melee defense when you're starting to get exhausted. So even the little Way Watchers here will start getting tired probably. These guys are already winded. It doesn't really affect me as much. Over here, the Spellslinger does take a little bit of a beating from those lasting charges, but I really don't care. And we are about to see another one of those brutal Ember Spears, and you can see it firing away once again like a heat-seeking missile, just plowing into these Longbeards. You can see these guys are on 63 models, and it just plows through them, getting a full, beautiful broadside shot. It actually sends Grumbrindle flying, 21 down from his over 60 models. These guys have lost 2/3 of their remaining strength in a single shot, and I actually do believe this projectile continues traveling and hits a few of these Rangers. That is brutal. Basically, an entire unit of Longbeards and half the Norgrim's Ironbreakers, over half the Norgrim's Ironbreakers, have been taken off the field by 22 Winds of Magic. This is something you're never going to get with Fate of Buna. This is something you're never going to get with basically anything that's not supremely lucky. This is something you can do much more reliably, I think. You can see over here the Rangers with Grey Weapons getting zoned off. Over here the Quarrelers, I'm simply exchanging fire here with the Way Watchers. It's not ideal. It's definitely a mistake on my part, but I really don't care. The Quarrelers only have 80 armor. Well, the armor's irrelevant, but they only have bronze shields, and the Way Watchers will just outshoot them. They're going to overwhelm them. They do have that range advantage, and they're going to crush them. Over here, another Prey of Anatherma does go down the Rangers with Great Weapons, and we are about to go for another Ruthless Pass with the Breath Attack. Not as ideally set up, I don't think, as last time, but nonetheless, you can see it actually does even more damage. 20 down to 22 models, and immediately routing. So that's really how you want to use this. Definitely, this is magic missiles for days here, guys. So powerful. Over here, the Miners beat up. Obviously, the Miners could be mopped up by the Way Watchers, and definitely a bit of a mistake here. The Way Watchers are... I'm not entirely sure why I had them... I do believe I turned them off fire at will, but for some reason, they're still firing off on the Miners with blasting charges, despite the fact that I think I assigned them to target one of the units up here. I think that if you assign them to attack a unit, and they're moving towards it, they'll be shooting regardless if there's another unit within its range. So unfortunately, you can see now the Spellslinger Beast is coming offline. She's simply pursuing the Rangers with the weapons here. I'm pulling out the Wildwood Rangers to go engage my opponent's remaining melee line. You can see the Quarrelers have shattered, the Miners have shattered, these Rangers are on the verge of shattering, and I still do have an okay amount of ammo on the Way Watchers. It's not amazing. These guys are definitely low. These guys on the flank are at about a half, and these guys are very badly beat up, so not ideal, but nonetheless we are chipping away. I'm trying to pick away at the remaining Norgrim's Ironbreakers here, because they are the remaining threat. And I actually have a lot of Winds of Magic still, so obviously if things really did turn into a long extended grind, I could always fall back on those. And you can see the Norgrim's here definitely getting beat up. Longbeards, of course, are not having a good time with this at all, but I'm taking some return fire here from the artillery pieces, laying the Way Watchers low. These guys are under half models. These guys are about 2/3. The Bolt Thrower, I guess, lost all the guns because I was focusing on it before. It must have lost all its guns. Over here you can see the last remaining unit of Longbeards is getting chipped away at by that focused Way Watcher fire. I do manage to rout the Rangers with some terror from the Dragon. Obviously the Glady does only do magic damage, which isn't great against Naui, but who cares? You can see Grumbrindle has no fear, goes down to try to keep the Dobby in the fight, but really it's not going to save him. You can see an Arrow of Carnage going down on the Longbeards. Obviously they're not breaking, but really it just doesn't matter anymore. There's so much fire coming in from the Way Watchers from all flanks. Norgrim's Ironbreakers are the only kind of healthy unit here, but I still do have that Spellslinger. I have two very healthy units of Wildwood Rangers, and my opponent is desperately trying to close the gap here, do even a tiny bit. But you can see Grumbrindle here does get netted. He gets hit by Prey of Anatherma. Foesigur's not going to help him, and he's just getting chipped away. And you can see just how fast even a Dwarf Lord is getting chunked. The Slayers here are going to get melted by another Breath Attack. You can see losing almost half, well, not almost half their models, but quite a bit of HP. And you can see my opponent's army is simply going to shatter here. To armor. Actually, he's just going to surrender because obviously the Slayers could still fight, but he's simply going to call it a game because it's very much over. So if we look at the kill counts, you can see the Way Watchers, of course, doing a great job. And this is something you can expect against your opponent if you're playing against Dwarves. If they don't bring shields, Way Watchers are going to have a field day. They do immense damage per shot. They are really accurate, even by compared to any other archers. As far as I'm aware, the Way Watchers are really precise. They've got good projectile velocity, all that sort of stuff. They're really accurate. They're really solid. So against unshielded Dwarves, they're amazing. Had my opponent brought some shielded Longbeards, this could have been a much tougher proposition for me. But nonetheless, those Way Watchers would have torn through. Even shielded Longbeards would have suffered pretty heavily. And obviously, I would have been prioritizing probably other units had they been shielded. As you can see, though, the Glady right here raking in almost 120 kills, basically on 2 breath attacks, just clobbering those Quarrelers, clobbering those Rangers, just annihilating those units, and probably another 20 or so on the Slayers, actually. And the Spellslinger of Beast raking in 111 kills, almost all of which was against Norgrim's Ironbreakers, and against the unit of Great Weapon Longbeards. That's just massive value. It's important to keep in mind that Amber Spear is overcast is only 11 wounds of magic. For preference, Fate of Buna is 20, and that wouldn't be taking models off. Fate of Buna is 20. I'm trying to think of what other comparable spells as far as that, just that much damage on you. Obviously, Vortexes can potentially do that much damage if they stay on a target, but Vortexes are unreliable. You're basically at the mercy of the RNG gods, and they might wander into your own troops and stuff like that. And Vortexes probably won't be picking off models that well either. So it really just goes to show how potent the Amber Spear there was, crippling one of my opponent's core troops almost immediately for a massive chunk of their HP. From my opponent's perspective, definitely I would have brought some shielded Longbeards, I think, and I don't think Quarrelers are worth it in the Wood Elf matchup. I also don't think Rangers are actually worth it either. I think you're better off dropping the Quarrelers, dropping the Rangers, and bringing just either Bugman's Rangers or maybe even Vanilla Rangers. I think that if you're going to bring any Rangers with Grey Ribbons, bring Ulthar's Raiders. But especially if you already have this much artillery, honestly, another unit of Slayers could have been useful to chunk my dragon if it tried to land, stuff like that. My opponent definitely had a good range situation here. Definitely 3 units of Bugmans backing this up could have been much more competitive, I think, because my Way Watchers would not have had such a field day being able to shut them down. Otherwise, not bad. I don't think Grumbrindle is an interesting pick. Obviously, no heroes were in here. Heroes, I'm not entirely sure I don't think would have made much of a difference. Most of the heroes are unshielded. Thane is shielded, obviously, but they would have been pretty susceptible to Way Watcher fire nonetheless. And it would have meant my opponent wasn't able to maximize that sort of infantry line. As you can see, the Wild Rangers did absolutely nothing that game. They never even engaged. So, despite everything, I definitely got some good value just out of shooting. Essentially, it was a game won entirely by firepower and a handful of melee attacks from the Glady and the caster. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent, some Breako. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely these sort of magic missiles. If you're wondering if it works against other factions, it does. I tried it against Chosen. I was able to knock off about and in a not ideal situation with AI, where AI just was not willing to clump, or wasn't willing to line up. Really, they kept staggering around. I was able to knock off about a quarter of the Chosen's health or HP, and had they been in a line, had they been engaged with a unit, I would have probably been able to essentially wipe the unit. The Amber Spear is just brutal. It can work against basically any top-tier infantry. Obviously, it can work against any infantry, but against any top-tier infantry, it's really optimized to annihilate those units if you can get that ideal sort of cast position. Now, I do have to do more testing with an Eagle, but I do believe the Eagle has a suboptimal arc. It'll plow into the ground, and you'll probably get much less effective value out of it, but nonetheless, it can be potent as well. So like I said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. I do hope you guys found this informative and just interesting. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share those, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.